France officially received the leader of Syria, who was previously a jihadist leader, and now calls himself Abu Muhammad al-Yulani. His original name is Ahmed Ashara, and here we see how he was received with honors in France. Here is Macron, France's leader, and the leader of Syria, who is just a jihadist in a tie. I don't know how these images don't shock the world that wants freedom. The world is literally receiving with honors a former leader of Al-Qaeda, former leader of ISIS, former leader of Jabhat al-Nusra, and founder of Hayat al-Hashan. West be shocked, because this is no small matter. Even Macron, the leader of France, the president, he is pressuring and intends to pressure the European Union and also in some way the United States to lift the sanctions on this jihadist, because this guy has done a lot of harm in the Middle East. Let me remind you that Yulani was the leader of one of the groups that came out of what was the Islamic State of Al-Qaeda and Al-Nusra of Daesh, an organization that, if you remember, unlike him, you know the harm that Daesh, the Islamic State, did in the Middle East. This is truly catastrophic, and to show you how serious this is, here is Yulani taking a stroll by the Eiffel Tower. I don't know if people are aware that someone who actively beheaded others just for not belonging to their religion, who right now wants to wipe out populations like the Alawites, the Christians in Syria, who are now under constant persecution. The issue of the Druze, that Israel is going to save the Druze in Syria. They also end up catastrophically massacred by this guy and all his gangs. Yulani is received in France with honors. I'll explain why this matters for the West's future before I continue. I want to announce that we are going to do a course on how to innovate based on concepts from the Torah. It's a course that we are going to take part in. 3 of the rabbis from the Israel High Community, who are Rabbi Miguel Rubinstein, Rabbi Zev Schwartz, and myself. And we are going to talk about how Israeli innovation is also connected with concepts from the Torah. So here you can access the link that I will leave for you in the video description and also in the comments. And you can sign up for the course and also become members of the Israel High Community. So look at this photo. One of the leaders of this so-called world of democracy and free thought, with a dictator who stands for the exact opposite. They're opposites, yet they're hugging like it matters. France fought, these people in the background are people who in the French army fought against ISIS, who fought against these gangs, against Nusra. And at this very moment, while they're hugging, Yulani is exerting religious pressure, political pressure on minorities. Hidden behind this tie, behind this image of good governance, behind this supposed democracy he wants to create in Syria. I mean, he's hugging this guy, but he's still the same guy. It's just that in one scene he's wearing a tie, and in the other he's not. Here he doesn't have a tie, here he does have a tie, he's hugging the same person. That's the West. It's the catastrophe that's coming. Maybe Macron forgot about the Bataclan attacks, November 2015, when a horde of jihadists came to a concert hall, and they ended the lives of 137 people. In a single night, 415 injured. I don't know if you in the audience remember what happened at the Bataclan in 2015. It was terrible, and then more attacks happened. It was a threat to all of Europe, mainly Europe. They took the lives of Jews at the Hypercacher, and all of this also happened in France. I don't know if Europe is already lost. There are countries that maybe can't go back anymore, like France, like Belgium. These are countries where it's very difficult because they've already reached a breaking point. For example, people from Spain in the audience greeted us several times. They're not very far from there. They're still on the edge of being able to rise up, express themselves, and choose leaders who don't make these mistakes. Latin America, the people watching us, who are the majority here, is an echo of what happens in Europe. What happens in Europe and what happens in the United States are, let's say, ideological, social, or political movements that later have an echo in Latin America. But Latin America, at least, can see the mistakes of others and act accordingly. I'll give you an example of what happened yesterday, in the last few hours, at Columbia University in the United States. They're shouting, "Free Palestine" there. Basically, Palestine should be free. If you've ever been to a university library, you know that libraries are places to stay focused, concentrate, and expand your knowledge. They're places where silence should be a priority. Although there are libraries like in the United States, there are libraries like in Israel, where there are places for discussion and dialogue in Israel. There are several floors, a library area for silence like a traditional library, and others like a yeshiva, where people talk and discuss. But what you will see from Columbia University is that the pro-Palestinian group came in to cause chaos, obviously with their mouths covered. Ask yourselves why they cover their faces. What are they going to do? 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 I don't know about you, if you have a child or if any of you pay for someone's studies. For example, if someone has a child and pays for their education. Someone has a child and you pay for their education, or maybe they're paying for their own college. Do you know how much university costs in the US? It's very expensive for them to come. People with a completely distorted agenda, who are seeking destruction, who are openly calling for an intifada. Intifada means the massacre of Jews. That's basically what it is. The intifada in the 2000s was people who came with explosive belts to buses and supermarkets and blew themselves up to kill Jews. That was the intifada. That's what's happening at the university. Can you imagine paying for your child's college? And that at any moment these ruffians could show up to cause this kind of uproar? It's just that with megaphones, they're out of their minds. What are those noises? Drums? What a show. At least what the police did was, when they got to the library, they didn't let the people who were protesting leave. Only if they identified themselves, meaning if they provided an ID, and I think that was a very smart move. I'm glad the police finally did this because you see, they come in wearing masks. They cover their identity just like terrorists do. Why would they hide their identity? Because intuitively, they know that what they're doing isn't something to be proud of. They know that's not something... And when the police ask them for identification, do you know there's this new policy that those who support groups like Hamas have their student visas revoked? So it's very good that at least the police did take action on this matter. What happened in the chaos at Columbia University? This is, by the way, something routine. This happens in many places in the United States, in Europe, left and right. Friends from Spain showed me how they disrupt universities there. It is, Western society is increasingly, let's say, getting closer with a sword at its throat. France signed a multi-million-dollar agreement with the Syrian regime, with the regime of this terrorist, Yulani, so that they can operate in the port of Latakia. That is to say, France also wants to have economic interests in this, which is what France has always done. By the way, and obviously, Yulani is once again granting Syrian citizenship to all those foreign jihadists who are here. Also, at least Macron is thinking, well, there are many Syrians who came to France, I want to return them to Yulani, so they are also trying to find a way to get rid of them, which I really doubt will happen. Consider this, why would any Syrian in Europe return to Syria? Now they can do as they wish and are close to establishing a new caliphate in France. But what bothers me the most, let's say, is the fact that the International Court of Justice. You know, there was a prosecutor, Ibrahim Khan, who pulled arguments out of thin air to issue an arrest warrant for Netanyahu. That's why he avoids going to countries like France because of this very issue, since it's one of the countries that is a member of the International Court. Even though Macron said he could have immunity, since Israel isn't a member. I mean, there are ways to grant immunity to Bibi. Because what this prosecutor from the International Court did doesn't really apply to Israel, which is crazy, right? It's just that the prime minister of a country, the only democratic country in the Middle East, which is Israel, should avoid an inconvenience. But a terrorist from the Islamic State, from Al-Qaeda, and from Jabhat al-Nusra, They welcome him with honors, and the French president gives him a quick hug. That's what I find crazy, but that's just to give you a little taste of what's coming. Also, what we've seen in the last few hours is that there are some negotiations, or rather, some dialogues to be able to set red lines for Syria. There are dialogues taking place between Israel and Syria, along with the United Arab Emirates, because Israel doesn't want another radical state next to them. Israel wants to protect the Russians, so dialogues are being mediated along with the United Arab Emirates, so that some guidelines can be established on what Israel considers unacceptable from Syria. So are those the dialogues that Israel is having with Syria? Yes, Israel has to hold talks, just like it is holding talks with Hamas. Regarding the issue of the hostages, which in my opinion, as you know, the mediator in the talks between Israel and Hamas is Qatar. For me, that's a mistake because Qatar is another jihadist state, more of the same. Now with Syria, there are these kinds of dialogues to set red lines and guidelines for what Israel tolerates and what it doesn't tolerate. But that's very different from going and hugging Yulani. The problem with France having done this is that it gives legitimacy to other Western countries to do the same. To also give a hug to a jihadist who actively did a lot of harm and continues to do harm, actively repressing minorities. It's crazy, but that's how it is. But did you see what happened there in the library? Generally, these are movements of the political left, of the European left, of the American left, and also in Latin America, it has some repercussions, particularly on the left. What I find ironic is that these people, instead of supporting the minority peoples of the Middle East, what they do in this case is give more power to extremists like Yulani. Because what would make sense is the solution I always tell you about. Maybe the best thing would be to have a Russian country, an Alawite country, a Kurdish country. Do you know what I mean? To divide it by giving power to the tribal leaders, to the heads of families. But the moment you legitimize a dictator, you are trampling on the minorities. And that's the big problem. This left that exists in the West. They don't understand the Middle East. They don't understand the conflicts. They only care about themselves and their impossible utopia. And that's why they give them legitimacy in the name of supposed brotherhood, fraternity, equality. But it's a problem. For example, Macron, the president of France, said on April 10 that France would be willing to accept a Palestinian state. Do you understand how serious that is? That's like Netanyahu said. That's giving a reward to terrorism. What a great strategy Gaza used. Let's go. We kidnap 250 people, massacre 1,200. And what are they going to give us as a reward? Humanitarian aid. Pressure Israel. They're going to give us a country. They're going to give them a reward for doing wrong. The same thing is happening with Al-Yulani for having beheaded people, blown up places in France, and for having committed some indescribable atrocities. Do you know? Separated people's heads from their bodies in front of cameras, distributed videos, if you remember the ISIS videos, and I don't recommend them to you. No los han visto, no los vean. Terrible. That kind of, let's say, ideology. Do they get rewarded with a red carpet welcome in France? That's really what happens with the left. That's the same left that accuses Israel of being colonialist. France has troops in Burkina Faso, Chad, Ivory Coast, Gabon, Mali, Niger, and so on and so on and so on. Now they want to establish a new base in Nigeria. But of course, Israel, we are the colonialists for defending ourselves from a neighboring country, let's say, an Islamic state next door, which is Hamastan in Gaza, but they are not the colonialists. Do you understand the hypocrisy, the irony, and the cynicism that's happening here? The conclusion is that normalizing relations with this guy, with him, doesn't represent progress, nor is it something that contributes socially to anything. No, this is simply a little strategic move that Macron has over the port of Latakia. Already in Syria, he believes the Syrians will leave France. He insists this will happen and they'll return to a chaotic country like Syria. So, it's simply the problem that comes from having a distorted sense of morality. When you legitimize, when you give legitimacy to criminals like this guy, like Giuliani. This is a message that is catastrophic for all future generations. What's the message? That if you're a terrorist and you're a barbarian and you cut off people's heads and you do the most psychopathic things you can imagine, like putting a person. Did you see the ISIS videos where they put people in cages? How do you say it? In cages, they poured gasoline on them and burned them alive. Acts that show absolutely no humanity, the most inhuman things possible. If you do that in France and in other European countries, they will reward you, they will grant you political asylum, they will take you in as a refugee, they will even pay you for being a refugee, they will welcome you. If you are the leader who ordered these executions and the leader who devised the whole strategy to make people suffer, the government will welcome you with a red carpet and a small hug, letting you stroll around the Eiffel Tower with paparazzi and big applause. No, we can't allow this, and that's why Israel, right now, we are a light to the nations. Because this, I don't know if people are as aware as I am, maybe because I know much more about the literature of these people, because I know what their texts say, what they talk about, their speeches, what they say about you. Those in this chat, this broadcast, or watching this video, what do they say about you because you're infidels? The inferiority that you represent to them, their aspirations to create a global hegemony, is what the West doesn't understand so clearly. Maybe because they haven't immersed themselves in what they themselves say, which is that you don't have to interpret messages. They don't operate like in the West, where sometimes messages have a double meaning. They tell you straight to your face. They say right to your face what they want to do with the West. It's not a secret. And maybe because they're not so aware, that's why they can afford to throw their doors open to jihadism en masse. But be careful. Not all Muslims are like that. Not all situations are like that. They are less devoted to Islam. Muslims who do not strictly follow these tenets of Islam. But it's such a terrible thing that Israel, we are the light of the nations. Because Israel, if someone messes with us, Israel makes sure that there is justice. And that's what Israel is doing now with Hezbollah. We did it with Hamas, and it's being done with the Houthis. It was an eye for an eye. They tried to damage our airport, so now they'll lose their airport in Sana'a. And does it work? Iran wants to mess with us too, and it will face the consequences from Israel. We're going to have to do whatever we have to do to protect our people, our future, our children and grandchildren. So, the same thing, this is the great example that nations around the world should follow, the example of Israel. With evil, you have to draw red lines. This is not a fight between them being Muslims and us being Jews. This is a fight between good and evil. This is not Arabs and Jews, Syrians and Israel. Good and evil is something that is not always understood. But you, an audience that is more aware, you should also take part in this. I don't mean that you should go and fight against ISIS, go to Syria, that's not what I mean, but rather that you, in the West, there is what is called democracy, and you play a role, and you decide who is going to govern, you decide who is going to govern. At the municipal level, in different areas, in larger municipalities, at the national level, you can decide the future of your civilizations. You can also campaign for who would be a better leader for your country, instead of allowing leaders who are about to destroy the future of civilization to be elected. And in a future video, I want to explain to you why this happens. Because when there is a left-wing ideology, that's exactly where Islam comes in. It doesn't happen with another ideology, like the right wing, for example. And I'll give you a spoiler already. The reason is because just like when there is no ideology, there's actually a void and something has to fill that void. And that's where Islamic radicalism comes in, to fill this ideological void. Because they really are very idealistic. These kinds of radicals, like the president of Syria, are idealists and they fill that void. That doesn't always happen. There are right-wing groups where, for example, that void doesn't exist because it's already filled. Also, people who are religious, for example in evangelical Christianity or Catholicism, often fill that void with another kind of ideology. That's why I think the future is the Noahide laws. The Torah, if people understand that we can fill that void with the Torah, with another ideology that compensates and really gives a que llena al ser humano, to know what the correct approach is, that's the solution. And that's what Noahide laws are, because Noahide laws are your form of Judaism. But we'll talk about that in another video. I send you greetings from Israel. Don't worry, it all sounds very, how do you say, all of this is very scary about the jihadists, this and that, yes. But even so, we are going to triumph. Don't worry, Hashem is with us. We are strong, Israel. We are a model for societies around the world to follow, so we are going to triumph. I send you a warm greeting from Israel. We will triumph.